The storm had been building since Tuesday, but Nora Vane didn't notice it until she was already standing on the Kellerman Bridge with her hands wrapped around the cold iron railing, and the river 40 feet below her, black and fast and swallowing the rain. She wasn't there to jump. She wanted to be clear about that, at least to herself. She was there because her car had died 2 miles back, because her phone had no signal, and because Kellerman Bridge was the only covered walkway between the breakdown lane and the nearest gas station. That was what she told herself. The fact that she'd been standing here for 11 minutes watching the water instead of walking, she filed under exhaustion. She was a storm researcher. She had stood in the outer bands of 3 Category 4 hurricanes. She did not frighten easily. But tonight something about the darkness felt personal. It started as pressure, a warmth at her left shoulder distinct from the cold, the way a hand placed there would be distinct from rain. She turned. No one. Then the voice. The railing on the east side is corroded, don't lean on it. She spun fully around. The bridge was empty in both directions, lit by 2 amber street lamps that barely held their own against the dark. The rain fell in sheets. A truck crossed at the far end, headlights sweeping past her without slowing. She was alone. But the voice had been so close. Male, low, certain in the way that only people who have already been through the worst kind of thing are certain. Nora looked down at the railing under her right hand, east-facing. She shifted her grip to the other side, felt the difference immediately. The east rail moved slightly when she pressed it, a millimeter of give that meant the bolts below were loose. Her heart beat oddly. "Hello," she said into the rain. Nothing answered. She walked the rest of the bridge quickly, not running because Nora Vane did not run, but quickly, and she did not look at the water again. She found out about Daniel Marsh 3 weeks later, entirely by accident. Nora had taken a 6-month residency at the Whitmore Institute, a climate research center housed in a converted Victorian estate 2 hours outside the city. The institute sat on a bluff above the same river she'd crossed on Kellerman Bridge, and from her office window on clear mornings, she could see the bridge's iron arc in the distance, a dark parenthesis over the water. She was reorganizing the instrument room when she found the framed photograph on the back of a shelf, a group of 6 researchers in the field, all smiling, all squinting into some bright past. A sticky note on the glass read, 2021 team, please keep. She almost put it back. Instead she found herself studying the face on the far right, a man in his mid-30s, tall, dark coat, looking not at the camera but slightly past it, at something just outside the frame, as though he'd heard something the others hadn't. She turned the frame over, a handwritten list of names on the backing board. She found him, Daniel Marsh, Atmospheric Systems. "That's Daniel," said a voice from the doorway. Nora turned. It was Priya, the Institute's archivist, small, efficient, perpetually carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Nora and looked at the photograph with the particular expression of someone who has made peace with something that still costs them. "He died 3 years ago," Priya said. "Kellerman Bridge during the November storms, the east railing gave way." The cup in Nora's hand was suddenly very heavy. "He fell." He went back for someone, a motorist whose car had stalled, got them to the west side, and then the railing. Priya stopped, lifted her chin slightly. "He was the best of us. That's not sentimentality, it's just true." Nora set the photograph down very carefully. Outside, the river caught the morning light and threw it back in pieces. "The east railing is corroded, don't lean on it." She thought about those words for a long time, about how certain he'd sounded. About 11 minutes she'd spent watching dark water, telling herself she was simply tired. She told herself it was grief transference, a phenomenon she'd read about, where the living unconsciously absorb the emotional residue of spaces where someone has died. She was a scientist. She had explanations. What she didn't have an explanation for was the instrument anomaly on Thursday. The Whitmore Institute's weather station ran 24-hour atmospheric readings, pressure, temperature, electromagnetic variance. Nora had been analyzing 3 years of data when a pattern caught her eye. Every year in the 2 weeks following November 14th, the date Daniel Marsh died, the electromagnetic readings showed a specific repeating frequency that appeared in no other period of the dataset. Faint, precise, like a signal from a source the instruments hadn't been designed to detect. She pulled the raw data onto her screen and stared at it until the numbers blurred. The frequency wasn't weather. It didn't match any storm activity, solar variance or external source she could identify. It appeared for exactly 12 days each year, then vanished. "What are you?" she said to no one. From the hallway, nothing. From the instrument banks, the soft hum of machines doing their patient work. From somewhere not quite in the room, a warmth at her left shoulder. Familiar now, specific. She didn't move, didn't look. If she looked, whatever this was might resolve into something she could dismiss. "I know you were on that bridge," she said quietly, not a question. The warmth intensified for 3 seconds. Then it was gone, and the air felt emptier than before, the way rooms feel after someone has just left them. Priya gave her access to Daniel's archived files without asking why. She just placed a USB drive on Nora's desk one morning with the quiet certainty of someone who had been waiting for the right person to ask for it. Nora read for 2 days straight. Daniel Marsh had been brilliant in the specific way that slightly frightens other brilliant people, the kind of mind that found connections in separate data, sets that everyone else had accepted as unrelated. His published work was on low-pressure system behavior over river valleys, but in his personal research files, the notes he hadn't submitted anywhere, he'd been working on something else entirely. He called it persistence signatures, the theory that intense emotional events left measurable traces in local atmospheric and electromagnetic fields. Not metaphysics, he was careful, almost defensive about that in his notes, as though he knew how it sounded. He grounded every claim in instrumentation, in reproducible readings, but the conclusion he kept circling back to was this. Some presences don't leave, not because they lack the will to go, but because they haven't finished what they came to do. One page near the end stopped her, a single handwritten note on graph paper, clearly added after the typed entries, the ink slightly smudged. "If I'm right, then the frequency isn't just a recording, it's a form of attention, something that can still perceive, maybe even still choose." Below it in smaller script, "I hope whoever finds this understands. I'm not trying to be haunting about it. I just want to know if caring about people has a half-life." She laughed a short, startled sound before she could stop it. It was such a specific kind of funny, that last line, gentle and wry and slightly self-deprecating, the voice of a person who took his work seriously but not himself. She read the line again. She thought, "I think it might." Over the next month, she assembled him the way you assemble a picture from photographs taken in different years, imperfectly, with gaps, and with the growing unease that you're starting to care about the subject. From Priya, he'd been the person who remembered everyone's coffee orders on long field days. He had once driven 3 hours to bring a data drive that a colleague had left behind before a critical conference. He had been quietly in love with someone at the Institute for over a year, and had never said anything about it, because the timing hadn't felt right, and then there had been no more time. From his research notes, he'd been more afraid of getting things wrong than of getting hurt. He'd believed genuinely, not performatively, that the most important work was the work no one gave you credit for. From the photographs Priya dug up, he had a way of standing at the edge of a group, not excluded but self-elected, as though he preferred the view from the margin, where you could see everyone at once. From the bridge he'd come back. That last fact wouldn't stop arranging itself in her chest, like something that wanted to be felt rather than filed. She began to talk to him, not theatrically, not standing in doorways with candles, just quietly in the instrument room late at night while she worked. She talked about her data. She talked about the storm system building offshore that she'd been tracking for 6 weeks. She talked once about the fact that she'd been standing on that bridge for 11 minutes before he'd spoken, and that she hadn't entirely been sure she was going to finish crossing it. She said that part into the middle distance, her voice flat and careful, the voice she used for data she hadn't fully processed yet. The warmth came to her left shoulder immediately, stayed longer than usual. She felt something in it that was not pity and not alarm, something quieter, something that said, "I know, I was there, I saw." "I'm okay now," she said, and then because it was true, "I think partly because you were." On the anniversary of his death, the storm she'd been tracking made landfall. It was not catastrophic, a Category 1, disorganized, spending most of its energy before it reached the valley. But it flooded the river road and knocked out power to the research station for 11 hours, and sometime during those 11 hours in the dark, with the instruments running on backup batteries and the wind pulling at the roof tiles, Nora understood something she'd been working up to for weeks. She was in love with a dead man, and the dead man, somehow, had been trying to take care of her since before she'd even known his name. She sat with that for a while, a scientist in the dark taking inventory of an impossible thing. Then she said out loud to the room, "I know this can't go anywhere. I know that's not. I understand the physics of what you are, or what you might be. I'm not asking for anything impossible." She paused. "I just wanted you to know that reading your notes was the least alone I've felt in 4 years, and that I think you were right about the half-life thing. I think caring doesn't expire. I think it just changes states." The backup generator hummed. Rain hit the windows in long diagonal sweeps. Then she felt it, not just at her shoulder but surrounding her. Warmth from all directions, like stepping into a room where a fire has been burning for hours, like being held by something that had no body left but still, somehow, remembered the shape of the gesture. It lasted 42 seconds, she counted. Then it released her gently, not with loss but with completion. She thought, this is what it feels like to be loved by someone who has nothing left to gain from it. The power came back on at 3:17 a.m. The instruments resumed their readings. On her screen, the electromagnetic frequency showed its highest amplitude of the entire 3-year dataset. A single spike, clear, deliberate, then it settled back to baseline and held there, steady as a pulse. She finished her residency in February and submitted her storm research to 3 journals. All 3 accepted it. But the paper she cared about most was the one she almost didn't submit, a co-authored analysis of 3 years of atmospheric electromagnetic data from the Whitmore Institute, exploring an anomalous repeating frequency with no identifiable meteorological source. She listed the original data collector as a co-author. She listed him as Daniel Marsh, posthumous. The journal editor wrote back asking her to clarify the posthumous credit. She replied that the data had been collected by Dr. Marsh before his death, and that the hypothesis she was testing had been entirely his, and that whatever they decided about authorship conventions, she wasn't removing his name. They kept it. The paper was not a love letter. It was rigorous and measured and scrupulously evidenced, because that was the only kind of honoring she knew how to do. But in the acknowledgement section, she wrote one additional line. To DM, who understood that some presences don't leave because they haven't finished what they came to do, you were right, you finished it. Epilogue. The frequency after the anomalous frequency did not appear on the following November 14th. Nora checked the readings 3 times. She sat with the flat line on her screen for a long time, in her new office at a university 300 miles from the Whitmore Institute, where she now ran her own atmospheric research team and kept a framed photograph on her desk. A single image from a shelf she'd almost put back, a man looking past the camera at something just outside the frame. She thought about grief, how it moves through phases the way weather moves through phases, how it doesn't vanish so much as transform, how sometimes what feels like an ending is just a different kind of presence, quieter, wider, no longer tethered to a specific place. She thought, he's not gone, he's just not urgent anymore. There was a warmth at her left shoulder, brief, unmistakable, private, the kind of warmth that asks for nothing and means, yes, exactly that, you've got it. She put her hand there for a moment, just rested it against her own shoulder, in the space where the warmth had been. I know, she said to her empty office, to November light coming through the window, to the part of love that doesn't require a body to keep its word. I know, you can go. She went back to work. The instruments ran their quiet readings. Outside, the sky was doing something beautiful with the last of the afternoon streaks of copper and cold blue, the way the atmosphere looks when 2 pressure systems meet and briefly agree. She had learned that from him, from his notes, from his way of seeing the sky as something that kept trying to tell you things if you were patient enough to learn its language. She had become patient. She had become, and she recognized this as the strangest gift, less afraid of endings, because she had held 42 seconds of impossible evidence that what we are to the people we've loved doesn't simply stop when we do. It changes states. It persists. And